Taking over the world, huh? I've heard that before. But first, you're gonna return Elio back to normal.
But she's so much more beautiful than before. Also, she still has a heart to communicate with you as she wishes. Isn't that enough?
Shut up!
Well, there may perhaps be some way to return her to normal.
Whoa! No!
Eve of Extinction, or EOE, is a 2002 action game on the PS2. You play as Josh Calloway, an employee of the Wisdom Company, who discovers Wisdom's plans for world domination. He goes rogue, and along with his girlfriend Elio, vow to put an end to Wisdom's schemes. Sounds like a cookie-cutter plot so far, right? Well, it is, through and through, but with the added twist that Elio no longer has a physical form and has become a legacy, a bioweapon created by fusing a human soul with a rare metal called auriculum. She's basically a sentient lightsaber at this point. Before Xenoblade 2 introduced the world to its sword waifus, there was Eve of Extinction. To me, EOE is the very definition of a B game. The character designs are super generic, and no one really cuts an impressive silhouette besides a couple of bosses who don't affect the plot. The music doesn't loop properly and routinely gets cut off during transitions. It has some of the wonkiest controls I've ever played in an action game. And yet, despite all this, there's still something charming about EOE. I'm not kidding about the controls being wonky. Look at this jump. It's like Josh is missing frames from his jump animation, and is already in his neutral stance while he's in midair. That arc can vary based on when you press forward on the left stick, and whether there are low ceilings that will cut down your jump height. Also, the first thing you absolutely need to do once gameplay starts is to jump into the menu and remap the controls. This is essential when it comes to platforming. Don't put your controller down when the cutscenes play, by the way. QTEs, or as they're called in the game, action movies, are frequent, and some require split-second reaction times, so you'll definitely be missing them unless you replay those areas. The way combat works is that Elio can convert into several different weapon configurations. You start out with a sword and rod in the beginning, but you can have up to 9 different weapons by endgame. Each weapon has a skill level that you can improve the more you use the weapon, and doing so will add another attack to its combo string. Every weapon has a legacy drive, an ultimate move you can perform once you find the lay seeds scattered across the game world to power up your weapons. They're all elemental based, and some are required to solve puzzles. When you activate a legacy drive, you need to trace a symbol on the screen with the right analog stick, which can sometimes be a tall order depending on the symbol. Lay seeds are always found within ley lines, beams of light which will restore all your health and Elio's drive meter. This means that every area will always have one place you can return to when you need to heal, either from the gauntlet of enemies you've faced, or because of the ridiculous fall damage you suffer if you're jumping 10 feet off the ground. Josh must have skipped leg day, because he barely flinches when the bullets start flying, by being just a little too high, and there goes half his health. First impressions of combat won't astonish you. The moves are pretty basic, and you can get locked in the combo strings, because input buffering gets in the way, so you might end up committed to an attack even if you know you should be on defense. The real trick to combat in EOE is to listen to what Elio says.
In the middle of an attack, switch to a different weapon to produce a special combo attack.
Start with one weapon, and then switch over to another, and that opens up your attacks well before you can level them up. Switching weapons is mapped to the L1 R1 buttons. It's quick, and the weapon attacks queue up so that as soon as you finish an attack and switch, Josh will automatically go into that second weapon's combo attack. It's an interesting concept. It encourages you to mix up your moves and not commit to a single weapon. It kinda reminds me of how the Devil May Cry games influence how you fight with the style meter, but in EOE, It encourages variety by way of making combo attacks deal more damage than regular strikes. Unlike DMC, however, there's no penalty if you rely on the same combo again and again. Another interesting thing about EOE's weapons is that they have abilities that affect your movesets outside of combat. Every weapon has a dodge ability, and the Rod's dodge is a high jump that lets Josh reach areas either too high or too far away from his normal moon jump. However, in order to grasp any ledge, you need to be unarmed, and that includes ladders. So you need to use the rod to initiate the high jump. Then, quickly cycle your weapons to go unarmed and grasp whatever ledge you're trying to reach. It turns platforming into a timing puzzle, and adds a layer of stress to what would otherwise be some generic platforming. What complicates it even more is that weapon cycling is inverted. R1 moves weapons to the left, and L1 moves weapons to the right, and up until the very end, I had to mentally train myself whenever I needed to do a high or long jump so that I was ready for the switching. As an act of mercy, the game does allow you to swap the order of your weapons in the menu, so you can have the rod right next to unarmed. This is also great when you have some favorite combination of weapon attacks you like to use more often than others. Later on in the game, you're introduced to swimming, and boy is it the worst. Remember how I said weapon switching was inverted? So is swimming. If you press X when you're in the surface, you'll dive down, and if you want to go up, you need to press down on the left analog stick. When you surface, all you can do is the weakest doggy paddle I've ever seen in video games. What's not helping with all of this is that there's no way to control the camera besides pressing R2 to focus it behind Josh's back. So up and down is relative to the camera. I totally drowned the first time I had to learn how to swim. There's a really clever point in the game where some areas require you to swim in deep waters, deeper than you could handle just on your own, and you have to use one of your legacy drives that creates a healing shield so that you don't lose your breath. It's one of the better uses of the legacy drive puzzles. The enemy designs are, again, generic, but they do feature some occasional flair. Early trash mobs look like the Turks from Final Fantasy VII with VR goggles. Mid-game enemies start getting more specialized and kinda remind me of the Vigor troops from Ninja Gaiden. My personal favorite are these dudes in suits who are wearing proton packs. At some point, Dr. Wily steals all of your weapons, and you need to get them back by taking out these stylish Ghostbusters. If I can give EOE a backhanded compliment, it's that I love that its art direction is consistently generic. The boss squad matches Josh's design pound for pound when it comes to looking completely derivative, and not one of them ever leaves an impression. Look at Lan D over here. Doesn't he look like he'll be your rival? Is the guy's gonna pester you for the rest of the game? Nope. Dude goes out like a bitch after talking up a big game in a previous cutscene. Your rival is this Kiyo Kusanagi maximum impact motherfucker right here. Boss fights for the most part are touch and go. Some have interesting gimmicks, like the first boss, and then some can be real stinkers, like the unwinnable fight on the train, where the boss will counter you if you do too many combos, so your best tactic is to do hit and run. This is where I said that the input buffering for combos would come to bite you in the ass. Raven has some pretty good fights, which is great since he is supposed to be the rival in the game. And I mean it when I call him a rival, because by 2/3 into the story, he also ends up going rogue against Wisdom, so that he can help stop their nefarious schemes. Even though they have more health and unique attacks, fighting bosses is just like fighting trash mobs in this game. Find that one weapon combo you really like, preferably one that ensures knockdown, and trap your victims in an endless cycle of hit stun until death. You might call that cheesing the game, but tell me that when you've been jumped by 3 dudes in suits and riot gear, who take turns knocking you out. Better than me, I say. Every boss fight ends with a freeze frame flourish, with the final hit, and it always makes me think that the game froze. That's not an insult to the game. I love everything about this janky mess. The environments are just like the character designs in the game. Mostly well made, if generic. You have, not New York, Chinatown, a military base, a train level, a Ninja Gaiden airship, JRPG Wilderness, Mayan Ruins, and video game villain corporate offices. The first few levels are dense and well detailed for the game's standards. New York and Chinatown remind me of Deus Ex in a way, with the boxy art assets that look primitive, but that belied the depth they had when it came to exploring them. New York is all about climbing and jumping across a skyline, whereas Chinatown has a secret network of underground tunnels, and following the corresponding paths to the destinations makes the exterior and interior parts of the level seem spatially consistent. The military base has a roving helicopter patrolling the outside perimeter, while the inside is heavily guarded by what can only describe as ninja soldiers. There's a brief chase sequence near the end of that level, where the game has an instance of clever use of environmental hazards. You're chasing two women through the base, and at some point, you reach a laser tunnel that has a slow-moving laser on the floor, moving along the same direction as you. This forces you to lose their trail, so that you can't ever catch up to Vixen and Zera before you reach their appropriate boss arenas. Once you reach the airship, the levels take a dip in quality and become more linear. There are still some very unique rooms, with special note to the final area that has a whole library that doesn't really have anything in there besides this QTE that I ate. The Mayan Ruins and Wisdom's headquarters are all about key hunting and backtracking. The Mayan Ruins have environmental puzzles that require you to use appropriate legacy drive, and Wisdom HQ has you going through all three wings of the building to power up the main service elevator that will take you to Alga. Throughout the game, you need to find lace seeds to power up your weapons so you can use your legacy drives to solve environmental puzzles. Things like powering up a building's generator so you can disable their shutters, or extinguishing flames to reach a key. Early game, the lace seeds are evenly distributed across the levels. Around the second act, the game gives up on the exploration aspect and just places the lace seeds right next to one another. But you'll still need to do some fancy platforming to reach them. The first time I ever played EOE, this was my brick wall, because I was still wrestling with the controls, since I didn't know I could remap them, and this goes hand in hand with that mental struggle that comes with the weapon switching and platforming. This was my second brick wall ever in the game. I actually had to stop gameplay and refer to someone else's videos on YouTube to figure out the trick, because even though Eliel spells it right out for you,
Do a high jump with the rod and quickly equip the snake sword to shoot out its blade.
there's a sweet spot I needed to land when it came to grappling over. Turns out, I was always too late when I switched over and I kept missing that very tight window of opportunity. This is, by far, the hardest challenge in the game, because there's never really a need to use a grapple ability up until now, and there's never an obvious indicator when a grapple reaches the target, besides Josh getting pulled towards the target. I said that EOE looked generic, but that doesn't mean it's not without some personality. Look at these crystal skulls used as keys in the Mayan Ruins. They seem pretty generic, right? But now look at Josh holding these colossal motherfuckers for scale. I love that. Check out this dude dying on this Mayan statue. It somehow activates a door. I don't know why, that's so funny to me. I haven't even talked about the story yet. Imagine a Saturday morning cartoon, written by somebody who's played Metal Gear Solid, and loved the concept of giving all the bad guys animal code names, but ran out of ideas after Raven, Viper, and Vixen. I should also point out that we never see Josh and Eliel uncover Wisdom's plans, or see Eliel turn into a legacy. We learn all about that through text boxes that cut in between shots of the real opening, where Josh and Eliel are held against their will by Wisdom employees aboard a cargo plane.
A date in the sky with you? How romantic. What's next?
Don't worry, you'll have a real date soon enough. A date with your girlfriend. Or maybe I should say, with the legacy.
Give me a break.
This is our hero, and that is his catchphrase.
Give me a break! We're losing altitude? Oh, give me a break!
This is where the gameplay starts. and once again, after you're tooled around with the inputs, you're thrust into a trial by fire. After beating these first few goons, the game does a flashback so that you can learn the platforming and adventure side of the gameplay. Then, after the game establishes how Josh and Elio reunite from the plane crash, the game flashes forward to right after you broke out of the office building and fought the first batch of thugs. It's almost like an experiment in storytelling. This game is Tarantino-esque when it comes to its perception of time. Just to sum all that up and make it easy for you all to understand. We started on a cargo jet, trapped with some suits. The plane crashes, we chase a guy to retrieve our sword waifu, use her to blast her way out of a building, fight some more suits, and then our girl starts getting nostalgic over what just happened not even 5 minutes ago. This is all in the opening act, and it's fantastic. The game will never reach this level of ambition again when it comes to narrative structure. The overall plot really doesn't come into play until you run into the man behind it all, Alga. He's the one who planned Josh and Elio meeting, according to the opening cutscene, and he's been letting Josh fight his way through. He's the one who explains that Atlanteans created legacy from binding auriculum with the human soul, or as Alga so eloquently puts it.
What?
Years ago, I learned of the weapon called Legacy, and how it generates undreamt of power by attuning the emoto-reactive metal, auriculum, to the frequency of the cortical essence, or soul.
What?
Alga needs Josh and Elio to form a strong emotional bond, so that they can kill Alga, who is tired of living in this world. It must have been a hard 56 years for this CEO of a big corporation. Anyways, if Josh and Elio kill Alga, that will somehow trigger the destruction of the world, because reality bends to the will of legacy. Up until now, we've only seen Elio as the only sentient legacy. It turns out Raven's Tonfa were also a legacy named Bija, which finally puts that one cutscene into context for me, when he calls out that name, just as he gut punches me in our first fight.
Not bad, but... Bisha! Yeah!
Who in the hell was he?
Give me a break.
Now, at the very end, it turns out that Zera, the baddest bitch in the entire game, the one who could have totally taken down Jetstream Sam if they were both in the same train, the one who has the dopest boss track in the entire game.
She replicated!
Is also a legacy, and not just a basic kind like Elio, but she's an Atlantean who's been serving Alga this whole time. Her legacy form is an endgame JRPG sword for Alga to wield. Alga's a pretty fun fight for the most part. He can do legacy drives like Josh, and he mixes up his swordplay with stingers and streaks. Since he's a boss in a Japanese game, he's gotta have a second form, and oddly enough, his look reminds me of Nobunaga's final form in Onimusha 3. Hell, the whole arena does. But Alga has his gimmick where he'll change colors that are associated with the colors of your legacy weapons. I'm not sure if the gimmick is that he's only vulnerable with his weapons, because by the end, he turns into some colors I couldn't properly identify, and I just ended up using Old Reliable, which is what I call the combo attack that's the Qatar charge, and followed up with an axe. As Alga lies dying, he wonders why the world isn't going out with him, and that's when Josh drops the greatest line in the video game.
You said so yourself. The auriculum is attuned to our own soul's instincts. We didn't want to die.
What?
Josh retrieves the auriculum, and the game ends with Elio hugging her BF and saying,
Thank you.
and that's Eve of Extinction, if you sit past the credits, it turns out that Zara survived even if Olga didn't. I don't know if that's meant to be a sequel hook, since, once again, the presentation of this game is so unpolished that I can never get a proper read on the general tone of a cutscene, unless there's some character saying something. There are some extra features that open up once you beat the game. The bonus menu has extra game modes that you can find hidden in the world, and archives all the QTEs in the game, which are called action movies in Eve of Extinction. Also, if you load up a New Game Plus, you start from the very beginning, but all your legacy weapons retain their levels once you reacquire them. Plus, you get a 10th weapon in the game, a pair of twin blades. Functionally, they work like the Katars, but their base damage is much higher than any of your starting weapons, and it just keeps going up. I've done a whole run where all I used were the twin blades. Their dodge move is a high jump, not unlike the rods, and besides its shorter range of attack, it's pretty much a direct upgrade. These babies can melt bosses, and I knew they were the best weapon in the game once I tested them out in the Demolition Soldiers. I've stressed over and over again how EOE is an unpolished mess, but that doesn't mean it's without merit. If you can judge the game's presentation in a vacuum, some areas, like the city and Chinatown, are pretty inspired with their layouts. It's unfortunate that there's not much to do in them, but I can see a third-person Deus Ex game with these kind of levels. My one real nitpick with the game is that it will treat you like it's your very first video game. Ever. Elio will say outright what you need to do next whenever you reach a new part of the level.
I think we can jump across to the next building. Let's give it a try. Josh, pick up the card key. The exit is blocked. We must find another way out. Josh, a key! Pick up the key. This key should work on a door somewhere. So it was this key. It's open now, let's go!
Sometimes it's necessary, like when you need to learn that legacy drives can be used to solve environmental puzzles for the first time. But it happens every time you need to do something. Ellie must think Josh is an absolute meathead, because she won't let Josh figure out the simplest of puzzles without some backseat driving. And seeing how Josh interacts with Wisdom in the cutscenes, I really can't blame her. I don't think I've done this game justice when it comes to talking about just how funny it can be. I think this is my favorite Cam Clark performance. The weapon switching and the fact that weapons can affect your navigation are cool concepts, but like everything else about EOE, they could all use a fair bit of polish. It's a B game, not just because of its cheap-feeling presentation, but also because of its awkward but interesting mechanics.